This survey that I'm reporting on tonight, as I said, was a very sort of strong or concerted focus on export performance. There were a limited number of questions, about 6 background questions, just really to sort of locate firms, the areas which they worked in, their expertise and so on. But 12 questions there on export performance and now listed there in dot point form, with a particular emphasis on trying to understand the assistance that firms require to enter and sustain export markets. And I'm sure that we can do some sort of further work on that area, and I think some further work sort of arises from our report on that last dot point. But essentially then we were just trying to document in a quantitative form what are the level of interstate and overseas exports, how are exports growing and so on. Just a quick comparison, because there weren't that many, well, there weren't any statistically significant differences between the two samples. So 205 and 207 samples are shown there by the industry segments. In 207 there were sort of slightly less IT services and software companies and so on, but a few more in the creative industries. But when we looked overall at the two samples and the population, this is just really a profile of respondents. There weren't any statistically significant differences in terms of the two surveys, which is important because it does enable some comparison, further comparison of the data over time, 205 and 207. Now, most businesses respond that they have capabilities sort of across all industry segments. The way to read this is sort of across the rows. So if you look at the first one, telecommunications, and go to the first column there, well, it'll be 100%. That is, firms that say they're a telecommunications company are obviously operating in the telecommunications sector, and so on. But it's interesting that the pattern of capabilities across this industry sees these. If a firm classifies itself as in telecommunications, also likely to say yes, but we've got significant interest or we've got significant expertise and capability, and or we're exporting because we're operating in what you researchers or the ICT Council might call multimedia or IT and so on. Again, the reason why this sort of question is asked to try to draw out information from companies in this industry is it's sort of quite different to other industries where people tend to be, or firms tend to be, more confined to a particular activity. Mining and manufacturing are probably two very good examples, but the 13 or 14 sectors of the ABS, this pattern is very different because you'll have firms with quite broad capabilities operating across quite a range of industry segments. Again, the data is up there is fairly small. Those people at the back might not be able to read it, but I don't need really to dwell on this. It's just, again, a comparison of 205 and 207. In terms of respondents, that is, we're picking up a lot of firms, 58% in 207 that are small firms employing less than about 9 people. It's about 91 firms there, 29 firms or 18 and 19% that are mid-sized, 10 to 19 firms and so on. One of the interesting things from the Centre's point of view is doing these studies consistently, particularly if you get respondents to 202, 205, 207 surveys, if you've got the same respondent, to actually just see whether they have increased their employment over time or decreased it over time as well. But this sort of profile again reflects very much the triangular shape of the industry with a lot of small firms towards the bottom of that industry. The workforce size, so here it's more on focused on employment, but again broken up into the 4 areas. If you look at the IT, the second column there, about 77% or 3/4 of firms are employing, in this survey, less than about 20 people. And we are able to track some firms through that where we've seen employment generally rise over time. So some firms have gone from that 1 to 10 up into the 11 to 20 category. Maybe they've struck the payroll tax thresholds as well. Didn't follow that through. But again, this is just a bit of background then on those respondents by firm size. 91% of firms had 50% or more staff employed in South Australia. Again, a bit of a background question. So most of our respondents are locally based firms or headquartered in South Australia, whatever size they are. And in terms of encouraging exports and working with companies that export, it was important that we captured that, that profile of companies. I think the last general question was about their revenue or turnover, trying to locate firms by their turnover. Again, there's some comparisons there. We picked up slightly more in the less than 1 million turnover per year in 2007. Again, looking at the firm size, there's no sort of, and revenue, there weren't any statistically significant differences between the two samples. But in terms, I think, of trying to understand a lot more about the firms in this area and their export performance, it was important that we were able to sort of establish that profile. Not much point doing a survey that's skewed towards 100% of firms that are less than 1 million, or 100% of firms are, you know, the equivalent size of British Aerospace. Again, this is just broken down by particular sectors. I should say, by the way, there may be there's a lot of information contained in some of these slides, and I'm very happy to provide them to the ICT Council, and I'm sure that they'll be happy to provide them to people who might want a copy to look through more leisurely. But again, this is just trying to break down firms now by the 4 segments. You know, where are firms concentrated? We pick up firms that, again, in one sector, they're all large, so we've missed a significant component of small ones. No, that's by and large, that's not the case. It's electronics area, or firms that classify a capability, a significant capability in electronics, tend to be a little bit more spread across the size of employment as well as the size of revenue. The ITs and multimedia firms and so on, and digital content tend to be smaller.